It is capturing everything through my webcam, so it's getting my audio, it's capturing my screen, and I've got my camera on, so it's also capturing me, right? Otherwise, it would not, right? You need to have the video open up there. You don't really need to watch that the whole time, but that's what we're gonna get rolling with talking about New Hollywood cinema of the late 1960s, all right? So let's go ahead and do that. So where are we kind of timeline? Obviously, if I just said late 1960s, we know where we are in terms of years going on, but let's think back about that timeline. I wonder if you can see me, how far to the left and right. Okay, so I need to let me just turn this way. Oh, God. Because later, this is going to look really cool. All right? Oh, God. I'm bald. What? Just kidding. All right. Well, we want TweetDeck up too. All right. Where are we in terms of time? All right. Here we go. Where are we in terms of time? Right. Classical Hollywood cinemas operating roughly from the 20s, and we're going to come to the. Actually, let's stretch that out a little bit more. We're going to come to 1970 right here, and we said that classical Hollywood cinema was at a dominant rise all the way up until the year of 1946, the peak box office year in terms of Hollywood receipts, which I expect every single person got right on here because it was so easy. 1946, and even through the 1950s, as it begins its decline, the mode is still in full operation. And indeed, one of the things that we said about the decreasing attendance in Hollywood cinema of the late 1950s, well, it starts in the late 1940s and moves through the 1950s on this downward trail, was that audiences got bored by repetition, both in terms of story, what we call genre in a broad sense of the way, but also bored in terms of style, that the style was so repetitive that they were nonplussed. The audience was not impressed any longer with the dynamics because the dynamics had become so obvious for classical Hollywood cinema. Then we said in the 1940s we had Italian neorealism, and we get both the notion of the new in there, but Italian cinema makes a significant shift in terms of a focus on human beings. Human beings in their place, in the world, in their relationships, and struggling in that moment immediately following World War II. And then about 1959, we talked about French New Wave, and this was last week. And talking about French New Wave, and also in there, we can get this idea of the new that's going on. That World War II was a significant event, not just in terms of its war, but in terms of the wars that were going on in both Europe and the Pacific. But World War II also really radically shifted humans' attention in the world. That is, if you recall about earliest cinema, the first thing I ever said this semester was that cinema's invention brought about a radical shift in the way that people thought about the world, that quite seriously, literally, we could see things we had never seen before with the ability of moving pictures. That the story about, for example, the water droplet, right? That one drop of water hitting a flat pool of water causes a king's crown and does that thing that you've seen it. That had happened with every droplet of water of all time, and yet we had never seen that before. The ability to stop time and motion with individual pictures and put it in motion again allowed us to see things we had never seen. Indeed, I think that we are in a significant arena like that right now with computer-generated imagery, CGI, that your video games show you images of things that actually never existed in the world. Right? If you didn't know this, newsflash, Avatar didn't really happen. Right? It's not based on a true story. Those aren't people. Those aren't beings in the world. What were those things called? Right, whatever. It's as forgettable as that to me. Right? That those things didn't happen in the world. That CGI allows an image of something that actually was never there. Even the real life and blood actors there were interacting with things that didn't exist. Right? That those were put in by a computer afterwards as effects. And so in a real way, CGI is going to change, or is changing, the way that acting operates. Because those real human actors are interacting with things that are not in front of them. So digital effects like that allow us to see things that are not actually there. They also, on a lesser scale, so it's not just about special effect, but they allow us to see things that are actually possible, but only because of digital cinema. That is, at the very beginning of Fight Club, if you've watched through the credit sequence, David Fincher is a master of credits. If you don't watch the credit sequence in Fight Club or in Seven, somebody tweeted about Seven this weekend, Seven and some other movie, his credit sequences are awesome. We watch the credit sequence go through all of the people, the cast and crew, with some thumping bass, techno, electrono, pop crap, right? Stuff. And then, but we see flashes of light all over the place is kind of how it goes. And then the first real camera shot that we get is the camera either coming out of his nose or his mouth, and it doesn't really matter, right? But it comes out, the camera comes out, and it comes down the barrel of a gun, right? And we see that Brad Pitt has that gun in his hand. That Tyler Durden's character has that gun in his hand, right? And unedited, that camera goes and watches the scenario unfold, but then when the voiceover narration starts to indicate about what's just about to happen, the camera goes out of the window, drops 75 stories through concrete and earth. Pardon? Am I talking about Fight Club? What did I say? I mentioned Seven, yes. This is Fight Club, yes. All right, so good gracious. Now, Tyler, you're messing me up too, right? All right, so the camera goes out the window, drops 75 stories or whatever, through the earth, and then into the parking deck below the building. You remember that shot? And it goes into, and it looks into the back of this minivan or whatever, right? And then goes somewhere else, right? That in effect is possible in the world. Right? To go out of a window, drop 75 feet, and go through the building, but it's not possible with film. You can't drop a camera, even if it's on a wire or whatever. You can't do that, but you can render that view with the digital. That is, that's a possible image in the world, just like Pearl Harbor. You know this movie? Pearl Harbor, right? Not the event, but its dramatization. When we are in the Japanese airplane, and I think we're sitting like Dr. Strangelove on the bomb, and the bomb bay doors open. This is not a reference to India, right? The doors on the bottom of the airplane open up, right? And the missile or bomb, whatever thing, goes out, and the camera goes with it, and the missile turns this way, and the camera follows it down. That's possible. In the world, it would have been possible we can do that, but of course we'd never see the film because when that missile hit, it would blow itself and that camera up. But the image is possible in the world, right? But digital effects is exactly what gives us the capability of that. We are in a place, I think, that's about newness right now. Well, in the 1950s, French, as we said, was in a place, kind of an appeal for newness, that what they wanted to do was reject the way that film had been for a long time. Italian cinema turned its back completely on cinema. French New Wave turns its back on what we call not the plastic, but the perfection and the manicured, perfection of editing, camera angles, etc. Well, in Hollywood, it takes a little bit longer to recognize that we ought to change. Remember that corporations, and by this time, that is in the 1960s, movie production companies are major corporations. Even way more major they are now, right? That 5 major media companies control 80% or more of the media that you contact on a daily basis, right? So in effect, 5 companies give you almost all of the media that you consume, and I consume music through billboard advertisements, radio, television, online content, and etc., movies, and etc., right? But in the 1960s, there were major international corporations whose profits are absolutely crashing through the 1950s. And they can't figure out why. Remember, we said they went towards these spectacle movies in an attempt to draw people back away from the television. They're very, very much scrambling for figuring out what is going on, why attendance has continued to go down. Well, just as in the 1950s, a new wave of filmmakers arise who call for more or less what we could call an auteurist style cinema. If you remember the bottom of the notes on French New Wave, we claim that the auteur was that person, or to notice the auteuristic tendencies of somebody, a filmmaker, is to notice his or her individual expression, the individual signatory kind of style and story. And about David Fincher or about Quentin Tarantino, we could really very easily tease out a claim about a style that's specific to, say, Quentin Tarantino. Well, in 1960s, Hollywood is struggling even more mightily with figuring out how to draw audiences back into the audience. people back into the theater, trying to draw people back into the movie theater. And so bad, though, is it that a studio like MGM, they own Wizard of Oz, right? They put out Wizard of Oz, that in 1963 time period, they were trying to sell the ruby slippers from that movie for $30,000, right? By the way, had you bought them at that time, you would have made a lot of money on that as an investment. But think about a studio like MGM trying to hawk off, right? Trying to pawn 30,000. That is, it must have been very, very bad. They were just about to go into receivership. That is, another company was just going to get to own them because they were so significantly in debt. Same thing with other studios, significant revenue falling. Well, in the late 1960s, they finally wake up. Someone like Mayer, Louis B. Mayer of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, right? This guy is the president or CEO or whatever he is of MGM. It's named after him. That means he started it like in 1920, and he's still the president or whatever through the 1960s time period. Do you want your grandfather making movie choices for you? Deciding, but that's what was happening with Louis B. Mayer. He was still deciding what types of movies that MGM would put out, right? You don't want, I mean, I loved my grandfather a whole lot, but I didn't want him making any decisions about my cultural pop life whatsoever, right? Well, neither did audiences, as you can see, by attendance declining all the way through the 1960s. Well, the time period we're going to talk about now is going to start roughly in 1967. Roughly, it doesn't matter what date we pick for it to start. And it's going to go through about 1975. Remember when we talked about Italian neorealism? I said it only lasts like 5 or 7 years because at the end of in 1948, the Italians have hope, something called hope, in the form of what was the check written to the Marshall Plan? The Marshall Plan, where the United States funds the rebuilding of Europe in 1948, Italians can start to smile because they see hope in that check, or rebuilding, and they see the possibility of a positive future. Well, now in 1960s, pardon me, with the new Hollywood cinema, we've got another really short phase, and so I want to spend my time today introducing that phase, showing you through at least one long clip from one movie. And then come back in 2 weeks, right? So won't see you next week, obviously. All right, we're all very happy about this. And then the next week I'll come back, finish that up, and wrap up Hollywood cinema in the 1970s time period by introducing something on the notes that's called the blockbuster mentality, a mentality that I see dominates us. 1975, and we could really actually, let's put this in 1977. I picked 75 because that's the year Jaws comes out, and it's a significant blockbuster that changes the way studios start thinking about how to release movies. But I'm going to change it to 77. It doesn't matter which date. I'm not going to ask you for that sort of thing. 77 with the release of Star Wars, rather, right? That radically shifts Hollywood's attention in yet another way. But something really cool happens in the end of the 1960s that radically shifts Hollywood's output in terms of story, in terms of genre, and in terms of style. And that style, as I've got up here, is influenced directly by television. That what television was showing significantly through the 1960s were old Hollywood movies. If you recall, one of the ways that studios made some revenue was by renting their movies to broadcast television. And so broadcast television would show old Hollywood movies. That was a significant chunk of what was on television during the 50s and 60s time period. So audiences are significantly influenced by this. That is, they are trained on television in a way, right? That they recognize its visual aesthetic, that television operates much differently from movies. Do you notice that television can be much more disjunctive than movies can? That movies are very tightly focused, very tightly moving you from one scene to another scene, etc. Whereas episodic television can move in much more disruptive sorts of ways. Well, the audience at the same time was much more educated than the previous generation because the GI Bill, without question, one of the great outcomes of World War II, was that during World War II, we offered, when you signed up for the military, the government offered to pay for college afterwards. That's an entire generation who got to go to college who would never have gone to college if not for the GI Bill. And so it raises significantly the economic impact of World War II as well. That is, we tended to be, therefore, because we were more educated, we tended also to be wealthier. I hate to say that if you're a typical college-age student right now, that is, 18 to 26-ish time period, years, you're one of the first you're the first generation to make that to counteract that phrase, the claim that if you go to college, you're going to be wealthier, you're going to have more money. Unfortunately, you're growing up in a time when that is not guaranteed in the way that it was in 1948 through 2000 and 2000. Or 2000, right? Whatever it is, regardless, doesn't matter, right? But this audience is much more, therefore, demanding. I'll come back to diverse in just a moment. Much more demanding. We'd seen it on television. Why do I want to keep seeing that same stuff repeated in the movies? So we're more demanding for what our movies were doing. And significantly, they were also much more diverse. We know that thankfully, the outcomes of social movements through the 1950s and 60s do have dramatic impact on the notion of Hollywood and other producers in the world, recognizing this audience that had been here for 200 years of African Americans, right? That we start to recognize and validate that in a slight sort of way, and it's tethered with all sorts of histories of unique weirdo American racism and all of that stuff that we could spend a whole semester talking about in my class on the history of African Americans and of cinema as well. But that's not for us today. Hollywood also starts, so television is radically influential on new movies. European, we talked about French and Italian cinema having an impact, the impact that they had. Well, we're going to see in terms of style in just a moment the impact of that. We did not, because this semester we had to chop some things out. We didn't talk about Japanese cinema in particular, but I would have talked for length about Akira Kurosawa and various other Japanese filmmakers and the influence that those guys had on Hollywood cinema in the 1960s. Similarly, we can see that as that audience is more diverse, back down to these notes, oh wait, it's right here, more diverse here, that Hollywood films, studios start making films for particular audiences. That's Superfly, no, that's Shaft. Shaft is in production in 1970, and I might mix up the dates, but it doesn't matter. In 1970-71 time period with Shaft, and he's a white guy, looks just like me sort of thing, with all white guys in that cast, right? But when Hollywood, when the studio recognizes the success of a movie by Melvin Van Peebles called Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, a movie made by a black man with a black cast for a black audience, being very inner city, very gritty and urban, and they see the magnificent success of this ultra low budget movie. The producer runs onto the set of Shaft and goes, "Scratch everything, Shaft's black." Right? They just shift it that quickly, right? And they call in Richard Roundtree. Richard Roundtree is in it. They get Isaac Hayes working on, right? Chef. Later we call him Chef. Now we call him out of work because he quit, right? He quit South Park after they did the maybe one of the funniest episodes of all time, the Scientology come out of the closet Tom Cruise episode. Anyway. And he comes along, he does a soundtrack to it, they do all black cast, well, sorry, that's not true, there are white guys in it, and crew for the thing as well, targeting a specific audience. Bonnie and Clyde, which I'm going to show you a clip in just a moment, I hope. Bonnie and Clyde, the movie poster for it, so we start using movie posters in this way, targeting audiences. If you were walking down the street with your mom and your grandmother, you knew right away if this movie poster was for you. It had Bonnie on it, and she's got a dress on, she's got a Tommy gun in her hand that's smoking. I think she has a cigarette as well. There's liquor bottles around, but her foot is up, and if I'm not mistaken, it's up on a dead cop. Well, okay, it's on a cop, it's probably not really dead, but her gun is down, pointed at the cop, and there's Bonnie, and she's smiling, right? And Clyde is standing behind her somehow, and looking very happy, right? There's a dead cop, her foot is on it, the gun is smoking, she's smoking, there's liquor involved, and it says they're young, they're in love, and they kill people. You knew right away if you were going to go see that movie, and you didn't tell your grandmother about it, because she just goes, oh, let's move on. This is terrible, right? And just puts her hands over your face, right? Starts to target audiences. Start to recognize you can't just release movies in general, but you release them in specifics. And so the production code, the PCA, is replaced by a rating system in the 1967-68 time period. We, for the first time, get movies that are rated G, PG, and R. These are the first three that are given in the ratings. Later, we add PG-13 because Schindler's List, Raiders of the Lost Ark, or The Last Crusade, one of the Indiana Jones movies. I think it's Raiders, but I'm not sure, comes out, and the ratings board wants to make it an R movie, and Spielberg's like, I can't have an R movie. That takes out a significant chunk of my audience by giving me an R rating. And so they go, okay, how about PG-13? And they create it specifically very much for Spielberg's movie. There was another movie that came out that was the first one to come out under that, but that's how the code was rewritten. Temple of Doom. Okay, I think you're right on that as well. Temple of Doom. And you know that X is not a rating system, a rating, right? You don't submit something and they go, oh my God, that's X rated. That's the default rating if you did not submit your film for rating. That is, you and I could go make a movie and we're not going to submit it to the ratings board. Well, it auto gets an X rated to it, right? Whether it's completely harmless or it's Debbie Does Dallas. Porn, right? It doesn't matter. And so the porn industry in the late 1960s sees this and goes, well, gosh, we can't submit our movies because they're never going to get an R rating. What are we going to do? Ooh, this movie's not X. This movie's triple X. That is, they turn the default negative bad into an advertisement slogan, right? That it's right away as an advertisement. So neon signs with XXX start going up as direct appeal to a specific audience, right? In that way. And so we have X, and then we end up in the 90s or sometime getting NC-17 added to that as well. In no small part because audiences were so bored with the content of films, and that those audiences were so rapidly different than the previous generation, influenced by social movements, sexual movements, gender movements, etc. All of the sort of really cool social movements that had generated through the they've been going on since the 20s. World War II just pauses them, right? World War II just puts a pause on the move towards racial equality. It was very much going on, but then World War II comes along, and we got to deal with that. It just kind of paused it for a moment. Our racial movement would have been much quicker, well, okay, by 10 years. That's not really that much quicker. If World War II hadn't happened, we would have come to that. That World War II helped kind of color over, play on words here, right? Color over all of the social, economic, ethnic problems that we had in the United States, kind of flattened us all out in that way. Well, these films are going to start to recognize a dramatically different audience for whom social values were vastly different than they were of the previous generation. That growing up in the mediascape in which the generation in the late 1960s grew up, right, that they had been significantly marked by popular culture, not just movies, but television and news footage. That in 1967, I think it's 1967, we had kind of loosely supported the Vietnam War. It was not really that popular, but the American public kind of supported the Vietnam War. And then one day we got the video footage from what's called the My Lai massacre. It's down at the bottom of these notes here. The massacre of My Lai village in '69 time period, that is, embedded reporters film the United States military landing in the village of My Lai in Vietnam on the border of Cambodia and bombing the bejesus out of this place and killing, straight on camera, killing not just the men of the village, raping women on camera, killing children, setting them on fire and running away, right? That is, when we start to see the reality of what we are doing over there, it's a significant change in terms of cultural attitudes towards Vietnam. That's the moment that support for Vietnam just absolutely fell out, right? That we no longer had any support for that because we started to see something that's true in the world, but it's never been true in Hollywood movies before, is that good and bad are not clearly divided. That there is not clearly something good on one side and something bad on the other. That the government, the military had been sent to Vietnam to do good in the world, but the village of My Lai and lots of other things showed us that, wow, that's called good? That's called acting good in the world, bringing good into the world, and it starts to show us that really most of these things dealing with morality and ethics and the notion of good and bad, really all that stuff's super duper gray. That it's not very clear. That the cop or the good guy in the Western or the cop in the cop crime genre film who was so clearly cut good, by the way, not all cops are good. Go to New Jersey sometime, right? Racial profiling, big state about racial profiling, or has been before, taking a lot of bad rap, understandable bad rap for that. Actually, just come over to the 4th Ward with me and hang out for a little while and we can find out about that. Right? That is that good and bad are not clear, right? Because you have a badge, you are not good, de facto, right from the beginning. And just because you don't doesn't mean you're bad, right? That gray area is gray is my favorite color. What line is that? That's a movie line. That's a line. Oh God, I just quoted the Counting Crows. I'm sorry, that's the Counting Crows song, Mr. Jones. Oh, that's the lowest form of anything, is to quote the Counting Crows. All right, because it's so easy to do, right? They start to recognize. Hollywood, remember, French folks throughout the 1950s are calling for a radical change in the ways that their films are operating. They'll go back to Vive la France, the way that it was, some glory days, but carve a swath of something new that's uniquely our own, that's individual in that notion of the auteur, but also is radically different in terms of the style and stories that we're telling. Hollywood did not recognize that its audience was radically different from the audience of a previous generation, those generations that had grown up on Hollywood movies. As well, the story that we could be telling is that the studio's control was significantly falling apart, that we get for the first time a new job created called the agent. Right? That if you want to be an actor, in particular, an actor or a writer, that you have to sign up with some agent. Imagine this. It used to be actor and studio signed a contract. Somebody, and this is pure genius, this is what you should invent in the world. Someone goes, no, you need an intercessory, me, the agent. Right? That think about what agents do for us now, right? Is that they represent me to somebody else. Well, why can't I represent myself any longer? Well, because they've told me they're so. That they've made an absolutely brand new career, which throughout, well, until today, is one of the most lucrative careers you can possibly have, is to be the agent for somebody who's out in the public eye. Well, that's what's happening here. We talked a little bit about the rating system, so let's go check out some movies. I think I'm going to show you Bonnie and Clyde today, a couple of scenes from that. We'll come back to The Graduate. Maybe I'll try to fit in Wild Bunch today. We'll definitely check out Graduate. I have any idea what I'd show you from 2001: A Space Odyssey. The clip would be like an hour and 30 minutes long, just for you to get anything out of it. Maybe I can find a quick clip from Easy Rider and show you just simply one of the coolest movies of all time. Guys who went out into the streets with no screenplay, nothing but camera, no lighting equipment whatsoever, no idea what they wanted to do. Dustin Hopper, I just messed it up. Dennis Hopper, the director of the movie. I mean, someone gives him like $5,000 and say, go and make it. And the first thing he does is go buy LSD and go to Mardi Gras in New Orleans and pull out a camera and start making the end of that movie. The last scene in that movie for 20 minutes is those guys walking around literally on LSD, walking around going, holy crap, walking around Mardi Gras. Right? But the whole time, they don't have any idea what they're going to make it about, right? They know that you're going to do some bandits, some guys on motorcycles, choppers, doing some westward stuff. Plus, it's got Jack Nicholson in just some of the greatest scenes in the history of movies. And the movie by Melvin Van Peebles, Mario Van Peebles' dad, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. We have that in the library. I strongly recommend that you check that out. So let's go check out some clips now. Say a prayer for me now. Don't save it for the morning after. prayer for... Who's that? What's that band? Save a prayer for me now. Let's save it to Tears and Fears. No. I don't know who that is. It's lost in the 1980s, man. Dude, I don't have any idea what happened back then. What do you think about Disney buying Star Wars? Oh my God, I cannot wait to see Darth Vader going to Mickey Mouse, bowing down before. I don't want this movie. Oh. It put in the wrong DVD. Oh wait, I know. I was trying. Well, hell, let's start with it. Heck, let's start with this. No, we can't start. All right, we'll start with this. This is out of order for you. Check out that super wide frame screen. That they're I'm gonna have to end up fast forwarding through some of this because I most def want to get to. Hey, do you know what audio pop-up? When you listen to Pandora, the free version, you get audio pop-up ads. One of them said today, "We know you're smart because of the music you listen to." And I took out my earphones. I'm like, that is crazy. Like, because I listened to Tribe Called Quest at that moment, they know I'm smart. Oh, that's so cool. Look at him smiling at it. Look at him smiling at it, right? I mean, that's serious violence. If I die, when I die, I want to come back as an ant. Because we will win. I mean, ants win everything, right? It's at the bottom of my soul, I guess. But then, if you're an ant, you don't think about I at all. Wouldn't it be cool to live as a human being where you didn't think about yourself, but you thought about we only? No. What? How much joy and peace we could have. It'd be like prelapsarian Eden. Moses, Adam and Eve, Moses. Adam and Eve and I would be like hanging out. He's preaching from the book, if you don't know. Look at that, disrupt right in the middle of his sentence. Oh, no. That's from the good. Why is church always filled with 80% women? Why is Sunday morning so segregated? You ever notice that? Sunday morning is seriously one of the most... Martin Luther King said this. I don't want to act like I just made this up. Martin Luther King said that a long time ago, right? Yeah. Oh, I want you to see this one part where the guy says, "Quote after me, I shall not drink from the fruit of the vine," and everyone goes, "From the fruit of the vine." Like they all mumble it back to him because no one really believes it. All right, so we're at the part we're now into it, but those guys who are riding into town started to rob a bank. But there's some guys like these guys who are up on the other side. It's a setup, right? So the sheriff and his posse, these guys, are looking down on the very bank, which our protagonists are about to rob a bank. And we're going to have to fast forward through it, but I would like to show you 20 minutes right here, but we're not going to be able to do it. So they're dressed up like military, but they're bank robbers. And this guy looks out and... I solemnly promise. God help indeed. I solemnly promise God help indeed. To abstain from all distilled fermented malt liquors, including wine, beer, and cider, Half-heart. This is the Southern Intemperance League, or the Temperance League, whichever you think. And this guy right now recognizes, oh crap, something's gone wrong. We got a problem here. Let's shoot our way out. This is going to be cool.
When I kick him out, blast him. We'll make a run for it. See, I'll get that check.
Right, the very kids who have just been down the street just destroying God's creation. Or using God's creation to destroy God's creation, whichever. How far are we into this? Notice how long it's taking? How much time's being drawn out by this? It's just so long. Relying upon montage, particular form of editing, to draw out the suspense that's happening. A lot of slow motion that you haven't seen too much of it. You're about to see it non-stop in just a second here. When they start blasting them. Kill some people. I like violence in movies, not in life. Watch this guy get hit up top. One. Not that guy. Sorry, another guy. That guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times we saw him. Do you see that? One guy got shot, but it edited the other things and came back to him. That's all right. I'll do sound effects for you. For the next 20 minutes. Right, that's all there is. That is, you notice, watch when someone's going to get killed on a horse, and watch how many times you edit to it. That is, they're doing what Eisenstein taught us. You can use editing in order to expand time, right? That you stop it and investigate that moment to draw out more from that moment than just the thing itself. That is, the one guy, all these guys getting killed, but we come back to them, seeing them in different moments of death 5, 7 times. Expanding time, right? Because it only takes that guy, I don't know, what, a second and a half to get shot and fall and hit the ground. But yet, it took, in cinematic time, it took 8 seconds for it to happen. Right? So like Eisenstein, rather than operating like this, he stops time and elongates time in order to investigate it. So you get way more dynamic. So this is 67, 68. Watch this. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What? He's guarding the people in the bank, like not letting them out. Yeah, it's totally creepy. He's like, you were singing to me. Sing some more, baby. Now. Sing it now. Right? So we see how editing is expanding, and they're singing Take Me to the River. Not the Talking Heads song, but this. So we got 8 or 10 more minutes of this shootout going on. Right? So you see how time is being drawn out, right? Through dynamic editing that you can see, that you recognize is editing. So that on the notes, what I suggested was that cinema starts to have a feel to it, right? That in watching John Wayne in 1953 in a Western shoot somebody on the other side of the town square, or whatever. The guy just gets shot, falls down, right? He doesn't get shot. The other guy falls down, right? And what we're starting to learn are two things. One is they use special effects for the, not first time, but they use special effects. You notice how when these guys get shot, wait till this kid takes it in the face. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But you thought it could have. You notice when they get shot, they have blood. Okay, they don't have blood. They have red. Right? They use squibs, little fake plastic like packets of ketchup blood that they have that are detonated remotely, right? So they could push a little button and have it blow up. So watch this guy. I don't know which guy. It doesn't really matter. Any guy. He's going to get shot, and you're going to see blood go out forward background. Now, I've killed a couple people in my life, but never have I seen that happen. I mean, it's just going to keep going and going. Right? That Sam Peckinpah, Sam Peckinpah, the director here, recognizes that dynamic editing, which would be draw your attention to it, that is, it goes against that invisible style whatsoever, but dynamic editing like that, in conjunction with squibs, these fake packet of bloods blowing up here, fake packets of blood blowing up here, can elongate not just time, but also the violence. That if we cut back to these notes, Oh, I didn't pause the screen recording. That was kind of stupid because I've just been rambling.